right, welcome back to Mush Love from the Mushroom. Another exciting episode we got for you. I am kind of meeting for the first time our boy Matty Marks. I've heard a lot about him, so it feels like I've known him for about a year, but finally get to meet the man, the myth, the legend. So without further ado, Matt, let's get a little intro from you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Matt Marks. I am a writer, a recording artist, and a lover of life things. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be on today. One of the things that Danny and I connected on early on in our friendship was just a love for the depth of life, digging deeper, what that experience looked like to us. It's been a constant journey of just like every single time that we find ourselves at different junctures in our spiritual quest, our life, just like having another person who is doing the digging to have these conversations with and open the door has been really special. In my life, that's been something that I found that I constantly feel the need to nurture is just this sense of, there's an endless depth to anything you're passionate about it because you're never going to stop digging into it and explore it further. So when you find common ground with people in your passions that really stir you, then it leads you to some really wonderful places because that's when time begins to go out the window. That's all the stuff that all the organizational principles kind of drift away because there's a common love for a thing that drives you to do beyond what's. So I've kind of been into that in the latter part of life, and it put me in circles that have been fulfilling to growth. So that's
Yo,
where I'm.
sorry to interrupt real quick, Matt. In your audio settings, can you turn off your noise gate? It's just it's or like there's a gate setting. It's just cutting in and out because when you're or maybe that's only on my end, but
No,
think it'll help.
I heard it too. I was gonna say something actually.
I want to hear all your beautiful words and all their glory.
Okay. So should I turn my input sensitivity all the way down?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's good now.
Okay, is this better?
way better. Yeah, it was just cutting out
Okay.
when you got quiet. That's
Sorry
perfect.
about that, guys.
Nah, I could hear
No,
you.
no worries. Glad we got that situated in the beginning. So what's called? I definitely like hearing all of that. It sounds like you're super passionate about life, which I like. How did you meet Danny actually?
So it's a funny story, actually. Both of us are the type to not normally have been found out, especially during this era of our life, at a party. We were both in the West Philadelphia area. I was at the time attending Drexel, and
Hmm.
Danny was living in the Drexel area. And through a friend of a friend, I was invited out to a house party, and I was kind of, I didn't have anything else going on, and I really, I was in that place where I was like, I should go. I should make an appearance, say hello to everybody. So I go to said party, and upstairs in one of the bedrooms where they have, their studio set up, was
Hmm.
Danny and a collection of other individuals. And just immediately, in the introductions and kind of going around and meeting everybody, one of these conversations that I alluded to earlier, where we just completely bypassed the small talk. I think pretty much after I knew Danny's name, we were talking
Hmm.
about the future of music and how we believed that there was a renaissance coming, where the timelessness of really vibrational, resonant frequencies was going to come back through the nature of like really impassioned creators. And so we were having one of these conversations, not even 2 minutes into knowing each other, and
Hmm.
it was at that moment that I kind of realized I was like, this is that affirmation of you never know who's going to come into the fold. You just have to be open to this
Hmm.
resonance, because in these moments it's like I may have never met this individual in my life up until this point, but we just connected on something that it would have taken, your average other person a long time to, if I were to sit, it's someone I care about a lot. If I sat them down and wanted to get them to that level of like, okay, let's connect on this, let's converse on this. So when somebody on a completely different path, having a completely different journey, we can just come and have this collision point and just be, so step for step with our understanding about it. It was like, clearly this is a person that needs to remain in the fold and that I want to continue to grow with because it's already such a complex landscape to navigate this life and the world at large. So to have somebody that you can that can act as a sounding board and really feels like a mirror that's not refracting in ways that aren't truly reflective of you, Because I feel like a lot of people, the way that they encircle themselves with people, we're all mirrors in different ways, but there are refraction points when you're not truly aligned with the people that you're with. And so when you really do completely resonate and are on the same frequency of the people that you surround yourself with, it enables you to be more vulnerable and honest and understand yourself better, because you're not afraid to share that with the people and hear it back in a way that, I recently had a breakthrough with some of my friends where, I just started voicing all these negative thoughts that I just would normally let rattle around, just to hear someone else potentially be like, that's lunacy. Stop it. Like, that's absurd. Because otherwise you're stuck in your own echo chamber. And so to have people that you can be like, hey, listen, I just had this thought, might be crazy. I might just be, a little bit in my head a little bit. And, but just to have people to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and not feel like you're going to get a judgmental response is everything.
Definitely. I think a good friend is actually one who's going to say no sometimes. A lot of people think a good friend is someone who just like always agrees with you and always is down. And like, no, that's not actually a good friend. That's like an enabler. Reminds me of actually a conversation I think I had with Danny on a previous episode about this guy, Tony Hasaya or something, founder of, I believe it was founder of Zappos shoes. And he basically, millionaire, surrounded himself with a bunch of friends who basically no one would ever say no to him. He just he paid everyone around him a lot of money, so people kind of felt inclined to just be yes men and always say yes, yes, yes. And he went down like a slippery slope of doing drugs. He was experimenting a lot with whippets, and I think people realized like it wasn't the best, but no one kind of was able to say no to him, and he ended up killing himself or dying. So definitely agree with that. Of like, you don't want just people an echo chamber always repeating what you say. You want some people with like different insights, different things to say. So one of the first things I heard about you, I think, was probably because similar to you, I had a great conversation with Danny right off the jump. I think we started talking about DMT maybe within 3 minutes, and like seeing aliens and all of that. But I think then he mentioned Matt. He's like, oh, my boy Matt would love like to talk about all of this. And he mentioned you as a psychonaut. So I guess what would you where is your like psychonaut journey begin? How would you like I guess explain your psychonaut journey? And then little funny question is like, how quickly were you guys able to realize that you're both into that? Because I feel like it's a conversation I probably wait until like this, at least the second time meeting someone, to drop that. Like, I see aliens in alternate dimensions and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So this will be a fun one. So this started probably, I want to say I was 18 years old, and I really started getting into the Pink Floyds and the Jimi Hendrixes of the music world, and really exploring like the context of everything. And that kind of really piqued my interest early on. And my group of high school friends, we were all, we consumed cannabis rather heavily. That was kind of our go-to. I mean, we would drink and do other stuff, but like mostly our centering point was just like chilling around, smoking up, listening to music, whether it was Kid Cudi, whatever was contemporary. Kid Cudi was another aspect of what kind of introduced the thought of this exploration into our circle. But one thing came to another, and over the winter break, I want to say of my senior year of high school, I had my first LSD experience, and it was very mild because it was one tab of blotter, and it was, kind of the beginnings of, okay, this is what this begins to feel like. But I was, I was kind of on the forums and really exploring everything. It was kind of like, yeah, that wasn't quite tripping. That wasn't, it was kind of like, huh. So that's just really piqued my interest, because I really like what I did explore, this kind of like, really pre-ethereal space where I was just really feeling myself. And, I remember just having a deep experience with a photograph in my buddy's family room, and just like really connecting with it on a different level and feeling that it was just opening me up in a certain type of way. So some time had passed beyond that, and I just continued. I love to read about things, so I was doing a ton of reading about it, and realizing that in terms of the way that it was presented from the media narrative and from in my lifetime, that I had so many misconceptions about even what it was and its history and all these things, and began to, even though I was in the early stages, kind of be a crusader for it, because I was like, I recognized that so many people had this misconception about what it was, and I am somebody who, I like to feel very secure in my decisions through running it through my own, rationale, through my own cycles. And as long as that's true, I don't feel any, outward pressure to like change that. So for me, that was a big part of, this early exploration, was just like this realization that, okay, like people who've done this have long been ostracized for doing so, and there's a reason for that. And kind of having this awareness of this kind of pressure and release of the, the countercultural systems, and kind of this exploration throughout time where the psychedelic experience has fallen into everything. So fast forward a little bit later into winter break, we had an experience where the same person who put us in contact with our first blotter gave us a new one, and he was kind of like, this stuff is stronger. Didn't really say much else beyond that. So first time I took one, this time I took two. Turns out he wasn't lying, and this time two was like 500 micrograms, and I had my first like really, really heavy experience. My friends they stuck with one, so they had their first experience with it that pushed beyond the threshold. But one of the things that immediately spoke to me beyond just the how vibrant and how the clarity of my emotion was, it was clear to me and clear to my friends that I was having a much easier time navigating this space and like and working with it. It wasn't like, oh, like I was, locked to the couch, like staring at the wall. I was kind of like, oh my God, like, let's talk about this. Let's explore this. Oh my God, it would be so cool if we listened to this right now. Or like, I remember I was over in the corner. I was like, yo, guys, I like grabbed an ice cube out of the freezer tray and I like put it right on my pineal gland. I was like, this is doing something for me right now. Like, y'all just gotta try the sensation.
I gotta try that one.
Yeah, bro, for sure. I was just early on. I was just very much like, okay, there's a lot to. Once it was like somebody opened the Playpen and they were like, this is here to explore, and this has been here. And I was just kind of like, okay, I need to have a lot of reverence for this, and I'm deeply appreciative for this experience, and I gotta kind of make a way that I can continue to find my way back here and continue to build on this. So immediately it was clear that I wanted to work on the integration aspects of it too, because I found like that, one of the things that, the warnings per se of going into an experience like this, especially a heavy one, is that there's going to be a emotional, a weight to, if you come to a thought, if you come to something that's under the rug per se, it's going to percolate to the top, and you're going to have to work with it. And so that was, to me, in those moments, it gets very intense and distressing, and it's helpful to have people to work through it with. And this is something I would not advise, to somebody going through. I would advise always trying to have somebody with you. But what it forced me to do, because a lot of my exploration beyond that began to be solo exploration, was to be my own source of resolution. And a lot of that came through writing and came through channeling these experiences into a way that I could get myself to flow through my writing and not like. I talk to a lot of people, and especially a lot of people who I'm like, I took this much and then I sat and I wrote for 8 hours, and they're like, what the fuck? And I'm like, it takes a lot to get to the place where you're beyond that's what you're doing. Because what it is, it's getting out of my own way so that the space here that I'm writing from, that I can ignore all the stuff that would normally get me distracted, that would normally like, look, you've been here for 6 hours. What are you doing? But when you're so immersed in the thing, so like that was a big part of my process that I discovered for, at that time I was in community college in film school, and I was just writing some of my earliest screenplays. So I was, and I was also at that period of time not using cannabis during this period of exploration. So one of the things I learned was I would have these kind of blowout experiences once a month, once every 3 weeks, where I would take, a heavy dose, and I would just go in my room. I would queue up some Pink Floyd. I would cue up some, at that point I started to experiment with the music of the Grateful Dead that I fell deep down the rabbit hole in. But I would put on my headphones and just like rock out and get to this really, really intense psychedelic space. And then once it got really, really intense, and that's when I knew that it was the most intense at that peaking point, then I was like, okay, because that to me, it's like it's a 3-act experience. Once you get to that point, then it's like, okay, then the even more exciting part almost happens for me, because it's like, then how can we channel it? Because then you get to that back arc where you're like, okay, I just had this rocket ship of a come up to this place where it went from 0 to 100, and now we're here, and now it's like, okay, now we're here. What can we do with this? And so from that space, it was like all these ideas that I had. I would open up these notes and open up these journals and begin to dig into it, and begin to have like this this worldview of things, and kind of this exploded out, expanded view of the hard drive, if you will. And that's how I really began to work with it. So my exploration from that point on, there continued to be moments where like I pushed to new territory and had, times that were overwhelming, and especially helping other people work through experiences. But one thing I did learn is that when I dialed in the set and setting, which for me especially was a solo experience where I know that I'm not going to be disturbed, and I have queued up, intentions and things that I want to do, that I had a very high success rate with going in and coming out not only with, a powerful and profound experience with, even if there was nothing tangible, but oftentimes a lot of tangible creative material would come through it by nature of just being so attuned with being able to pull all these things together, and being in a space where, you talk about, changing the neural networks and reconditioning the mind, through a lifetime of being taught to think a certain way. When you are able to indulge in these experiences and work with them, you talk about how, and you look at studies about how these experiences, resemble the childlike state of neurons firing, because there's not these compartmentalizations that are built up. So really what I would visualize on top of what I would experience was these networks breaking down, all of these formulations and all these pockets that a lifetime of conditioning within a society was trying to put on. Okay, here's how you're supposed to think about this. I would just continue to. I really need to find the study one day, but it's almost like a brain glue is how it was described to me, in terms of how we hold ideas. And there's like a little bit of elbow grease internally required to like get that glue off, because it's why we're initially resistant to changing the idea. And this was one of my first fundamental understandings with like questioning everything in these states. It was like, okay, well, this is how I've always thought about this, so this is how I've always done this, but why? What stems from that? And really picking at that. And that kind of ethos really permeated through life, and it came from this nature of like, this experience is reality. It is in the same way that, when we wake up in the morning, we are, the result of our reality is a state of our brain chemistry and how we perceive the world. When we introduce different neurochemicals and different compounds to our system, this is the reality. It's as real to us as anything. And this is one of the big reasons why I try to steer people away from calling entheogens hallucinogens, is because I've never seen anything or experienced anything that I did not believe was real under the influence of these substances. If anything, they were more real and more visceral and more impactful than the days between. And so for that reason, I think, it's important that we have that conversation as well as a community at large, because I think that painting it as such, classical hallucinogens, all the literature, there's a lot of stuff that is, and it's a very simple way to frame it that I think gives people this impression that it's about, exactly, and it's about this like, this show of like, you take this thing and then everything's woo, and like, that is such a small piece of the puzzle. It's such a small piece of the puzzle.
I definitely agree. I could listen to you talk for the whole day. I love you got a lot of good insights, and just the way you talk is kind of mesmerizing. Very insightful. I enjoyed that. I guess I want to have a little question for Danny before we have to wrap up. Is do you guys I know you've like tripped before. Do you guys ever like intend to microdose on the same day? Does that like help you in the studio to like? I know Matt was saying kind of taking LSD might help him get into a flow state so he can just write for 8 hours. Does it help if you're with someone else to like get onto the same flow state, or is that like pretty difficult to do? It's really like on your own.
So no, absolutely. Pretty early on when I started microdosing with Mushmore, I definitely had Matt hit them up as well and kind of, you know, get on the wave and stuff. So, I mean, just to go back to your previous question, you said like, when did we have the conversation about psychedelics and stuff like that too? And it'll tie in well to what Matt said about writing and everything too. The funny thing is like we had met at that party, like he was saying earlier. And then I was like, oh my God, this dude's incredible. He was like freestyling over a beat me and the homies were making and everything. And I was like, all right, well, we got to get Matt through my studio because like their setup was like, you know, a tiny little kind of whatever corner room, but not the best setup. So I was like, all right, we should all come back to my house one time, like intentionally try to make a beat for Matt and like let him do his thing. You know what I mean? Because I was like, he deserves it. And it's funny because there was a couple of things I didn't know at the time, but I didn't know that was Matt's first time in a true studio environment, like kind of really spitting into a microphone. He had a background in choir and music throughout his upbringing, but yeah, so he's sitting there, me and 3 other producers were making this phenomenal beat, this phenomenal song or whatever. And Matt like was just, you know, pad and, you know, pen and pad, just whatever, quiet in the corner or whatever. And then Venus, stop. Sorry, the cat is tweaking. But so he's writing in the corner and stuff. And then at some point, I think he like kind of slipped in casually, like, yeah, I'm off a couple tabs. That might help the creativity, or just like said it so nonchalant. And I had no idea because Matt is like extremely grounded. All right, let me just let the cat in. Hold up.
Yeah, I think I heard about this initial freestyle and like. You recorded it. You still have the recording of it, right?
It was so. The funny part is this song wound up. It was the first song that he had done into the studio environment. The first song we did together, but it wound up like more than a year later. It wound up being the outro to his first project. So it was kind of funny because we made that together. He went out to California for an internship, and then that song that we made, which was the first one in the chronology, became the outro of the project, that his first project. So that was super funny. But he just casually mentioned that, and I was like, "Wait, what? Like you're off of how much right now?" And like he was just so grounded and collected. So that's when I knew. I was like, "Oh, this dude is a special breed." But going back to what you just said about microdosing, so like. When I got onto the journey pretty early, Matt probably started a couple months after me, and yeah, I think there was definitely some days where he would come over to the studio and it'd be like, oh, like you microdose. We wouldn't go out of our way to, but it would just kind of like sync up. You know what I mean? We're like, oh, okay, it's kind of like that nod, like okay.
And even on days that we weren't seeing each other that week, we would kind of like have discourse back and forth, like. I would be like, oh, yo, what regimen are you doing this week? Or like, what days are you rocking?
Stamets, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it would just kind of be one of those things too, where I feel, you know, I do this similarly with art that I share with my friends. Like we'll pick a movie and we'll sync up and watch it. And we'll pick, you know, an album, we'll sync up and watch it. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And so in the same way, I really do. It's like, it's cool to know, you know, and it's cool when we catch up. It's like, oh, yo, how did your last week go? Knowing that, like, okay, on Tuesday and Thursday, or Tuesday and Friday, however we chose to rock out, whatever the case was, it's like, okay. And we get to talk about that and have this tangible, because we both, in the same way, you know, we're both living this life, running around, we come back, and it's not like, there's almost more value in those conversations than when we share the day together, because it's like, when we share the day, we're having kind of a collectivized experience that's kind of fed into by both being on that. But when we're both on this level, we're both tuned up a little bit and we're having our separate experiences. It's like, oh my gosh,
more data points.
I was pushing past this boundary and I was doing this, and then I didn't even realize and I forgot. And by 3 p.m. I was like, oh, that's right. This morning I had a little bit extra vitamins. And then by that point, you know, you're laughing because it is funny because there's objective nodal points of like, like you said, more data points separated. We come back together, and it's like, oh no, like
There is
Yeah.
this was,
something there, yeah.
That's
yep,
something. Yeah,
And
for sure.
I think one of the things that we both immediately noticed too, I mean, other than like creativity and just like general calm, good feelings, was because Matt's been on a really impressive fitness weight loss journey as well over the past year and stuff. And when I started microdosing, I think we've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I've always noticed that microdosing really helps me work out. It helps with the mind to muscle connection. It helps me focus on my breathing pattern, and breath is everything when you're working out. That's where a lot of your strength and endurance and everything comes through. So I think that was one of the main things me and Matt like were the you know, separate days or whatever, but the data points where we're like, oh, there's some commonalities, because Matt would be like, dude, I was running today and like I microdosed this morning and I was able to catch my breath in a different way, and he's like, I ran 3 extra miles and didn't even realize because I was so in a flow, and I'd be like, yeah, dude, I was lifting earlier and fucking you know, I microdosed and I was like, I went for 2.5, like normally I'll work out for an hour and a half. It was 2.5 hours, and I was like setting personal records and stuff like that. So I do think it really, really helps with that mind to muscle or like mind to body bridge. And, you know, that's everything too, because it's like that just helps with the intentionality. So yeah, it's definitely really cool. And like, we've definitely both seen a lot of benefits from it. It was cool too, because like, again, some variables in our studies or whatever, like I've been pretty true to the Fadiman for almost the entire time, but there was like, I think a week or two where Matt was doing Stamets, and he's like, honestly, like I could see myself doing this because it just seems like, you know, you're just taking a morning supplement and it just was giving consistent good results. So yeah, it's really awesome to be able to compare and contrast.
Definitely.
oh, sorry, Jeremy, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to say that beyond the mind to muscle, one of the things that I really noticed in exploring my physicality while taking the supplements was that I was able to let this little bit, because having such a deep connectivity with the far out of these experiences, letting that little bit of divine spark come through and have that be kind of the power that comes through beyond the mind to muscle is like, you know, at 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm out on my run, when I'm looking for that extra dig deep, like there is that little bit of like, you know, Mother Earth energy, like that little bit of divine spirit, like that extra light, you know, that as Bob Weir, the Grateful Dead, says, that little bit of extra shimmer in your eyes, because he's another one that advocates heavily, and he still has, you know, a microdosing protocol, and he's kicking and still rocking stages into his mid-70s. So there's definitely some proof in the pudding, and even objectively what we've experienced, just like this really resonant sense of like fully, you know, bringing all the pieces together, and especially when you push your limits. And I find that in anything, when you push your limits, that's really when everything's revealed, is you kind of see where, you know, where the auxiliary boosters actually are. You know, you see what is capable, and then what is beyond capable, and you kind of bring everything into the fold. But it really has been a beautiful, you know, opportunity to learn from each other and learn from ourselves through this process.
Definitely, I agree. Well, again, I loved hearing from you. I learned a lot. I got definitely a lot of cool stories. Some of them I think I've heard a little bit, at least parts of before from Danny. But hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future, because I feel like there's still so much more we can discuss.
Absolutely.
But I think that's about all for today. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
You go ahead first.
I'll just say, yeah, I'm glad to get Matt on here. Definitely one of the people who's taught me a lot about, you know, the divine realm, and you know, just has helped me grow as a person. And we, like you said, Jeremy, you're like, we could have these conversations all day. Now that we live in the same house, we do have these conversations all day.
Yeah,
we really dig deep and get to explore that pattern. And I think it's cool, like we were saying earlier, having people that really are good reflection points where you can, you know, be real with one another. We can disagree in healthy ways. We can, you know, come to conclusions together. So yeah, it's really exciting to get one of my brothers on the podcast to share his experiences, and we'll definitely probably have an episode 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 with Matt, because I know he's got plenty more insights and value to offer on the topic. But yeah, just grateful as always, and I'll pass it over.
I just want to say to everybody, one of the biggest takeaways that I've had from life in general is that fear exists within the unknown, and within the unknown also exists all the things that we couldn't even have possibly imagined the splendorous things, the wonderful things. So the reason that we fear things is because we've yet to experience them, and that there's a discomfort in that. And our imagination, it works in both ways. We can picture, a wonderful future for ourselves, and we can picture contentment and peace for ourselves, and we can also terrorize ourselves and have thoughts that make us uncomfortable. So I think that leaning into things that tap into this primal sense of fear and new frontiers, it makes us stronger, and it makes us more resilient and loving people, because it enables us to be reminded of our own humanity, and how grateful we should be for just each day and each opportunity to create and love and be. And so yeah, that's my message to the people. And I definitely thank you so much for giving us the platform to have this conversation. And I would be honored to be back to share some more of my travels and with new lessons along the way.
Hell yeah, sounds good. Thank you as always. And if you guys are into music, check out Matty Marks. Is that what you go by on Apple
Matt
Music?
Marks.
I go by Matt Marks. That's
Matt Marks.
That's who I am. That's who you get, man.
Matt Marks, Danny Camp, good ass music. Check them out. Thanks as always. Much love from the Mushroom. See you
Much
guys
love,
soon.
guys.
Much love.
Hell
Much
yeah.
love.
Be well, everybody.